This game is classic Daniel Naroditsky, going after the king and a beautiful checkmate to finish the game that you must see. So this was played on chess.com, it's now in the Immortal Games library because of how beautiful it was, played against Timur Gureyev here, and this was actually an hour and a half time control each, so it wasn't a quick play game, really high quality chess. So Danya kicks off with e4, we had e5, bishop c4, the bishop's opening, knight f6, d3 holds the pawn, knight c6, and now we had the knight coming to c3, different setups of course, but what Danya's actually playing for here, rather than lots of breaks in the centre with c3, d4, we're going to see he goes for very aggressive f4 kind of stuff in the future of this game. He's such an attacking player. So knight a5 was now played. That's the thing when you play like this. Black can go after this bishop straight away, but Danya actually just lets black have it, tries to go for counterplay on the king side here. So knight g to e2 played, leaving the way for this f-pawn to roll. We had c6 from black, supporting a later d5. This bishop now tucked back to b3, black develops, both players castled here, and now Danya goes bishop g5, very aggressive, pinning that knight, and so this bishop actually just nudges back in a moment. First h6, then bishop e7, it got out of the way, let the black king castle, now it's coming back to break the pin here. And Danya now goes for a d4 break, because this e-file has now been blocked from the rook and black hasn't yet done anything here, he goes, okay, I'm going d4, I want to liberate, and it also clears some space for his queen, very aggressive as we'll see. So black now goes d6, holds the centre, queen to d3, and now pawn b5 is a great move, going for queenside counterplay, and actually now threatening b4, chasing that knight away. And a3 was perhaps the best move here. It's the top engine move. It just looks quite ugly though, letting black take here. They've got this classic bathtub formation pawn structure. If you've never heard of this one, this kind of looks like a bathtub, but it's a flexible pawn structure. You know, is black going to go c5, d5, depending on what white does? Nice position for black here, really. So instead of going a3 and preventing b4, Danya just goes f4. Classic play from him. He loves to attack. Black then took here, the knight took back, but this whole way of playing, you let black achieve b4, and you can't drop your knight back here, swing it round to the king side into the attack, because then there's problems here, there's tactics against the bishop. Black can actually chop this pawn. If you take here first, the queen recaptures and it holds the knight, and if instead you take here, well, black takes here, they've won a pawn, good game here. So that's the tactical problem of bringing this knight back, and that's why it has to come to a4, but this is very ugly now. Anytime you put the knight on the edge of the board, you have to be so careful, especially in a pawn structure like this. It literally has no jumps now, and this is what black plays against. So c5 was played, drives this knight back, also supports this pawn here, and now here black just plays a bit imprecisely. Actually the best here was just taking on b3, say the c pawn recaptures to try and bring a rook here soon, well bishop b7 can come, the knight still has no jumps, and you pressure this e4 pawn, e5 is the best move which we see in the game, but now this knight can hop into d5 here, and say you had a line like this, the bishops come off, you take on d6, queen recaptures. The nice thing here is you still hold this pawn, you can bring rooks to the centre to defend, this one can come here, it's just better for black, this knight's a big problem. Now black does something very similar in the game, tries to make that knight look really silly, but starts with this c4 move, and the idea is nice. After the bishop takes, knight takes, queen takes, well you've now lined these ones up in a skewer, so the queen comes to a5, hits the knight, but also prepares bishop a6. And say you try pawn b3, hold your knight, well this is just dreadful, you know, black's won an exchange, better position, really good there. So you can't go b3, that's no good, but that's not what Danya had planned. He has a beautiful comeback here, and he slams down e5, excellent move. Because now when bishop a6 comes, which it duly did, the queen moves, well here actually black has some problems to solve. Now we had takes on f1 played. if you try and move the knight here away from the attack of the pawn, well, the problem is you could slide this rook away from the attack and you hit the knight and these bishops are staring at each other. So you don't have time to take here, for example, or we take here, we hit the queen, then we pick up your bishop. And if instead you tried something like bishop to b7, coming back to defend, well, now we can take here, knight recaptures, win a pawn, great position for white, of course. So these are the tactical problems with knight d5. So instead Gureyev took on f1 and Danya now takes here on f6, again putting a question to black. The bishop retreated here, hits this knight. If you capture this pawn, well, then we can take the rook, say the bishop's come off, knight recaptures. Although it might look like this knight is still trapped, actually you can get it back into the game. So say the rook came here, h3, rook here, well, now you can go c3. And because there's no a5 supporting that pawn, you know, whether you capture or whatever happens, the knight should be coming back to c3 soon. You can get it back into play. This is the problem. So we didn't have takes on f6. Instead, this bishop dropped back, came to b5, hits this knight now. But what Danya's going for here, after takes here, hitting the rook, rook moves, is just abandoning that knight. He can't save it anyway, so he goes for counterplay. So queen d5 played. Now you can't take with the bishop or you lose your queen. So we had queen takes on a4 here. And now the knight hit d4, protects this pawn, hits the bishop. So that one came back to e8 here. And now rook e1, developing more pieces into the game. Black goes rook a to b8. And the reason for that move, you want to activate this rook, say to c5. We see that in a moment, but you don't want to lose your bishop, rook on a8, of course, have it hang there. Rook e3 now from Danya. Excellent rook lift. Very basic idea. He wants to mate the black king. And now great counterplay from black. Rook c5, just giving the pawn to then double the rooks and get counterplay down here. And it's just excellent play, because after rook g3 from Danya, here black blinks. But what they should have done is taken on c2, and it should be a draw with best play. So you're actually giving an exchange if white takes that one, queen takes. But the problem is the back rank here. Say you give the king some room, we can check, king h2, and now rook c1. And because you're threatening to mate, you have to move the rook, give some room. Okay, the line goes on, but it should be a draw here. Different moves for both players, but it's a level position. You know, the rook's been forced from the g file. And if instead of actually capturing that rook on c2 with the knight, you know, if you don't take it, say for example you go queen h6, threatening mate in 1, well then white can actually start checking, driving the king out, check like this. Now if you take with the knight, this time you're actually getting mated. I won't go through the whole line, but the queen can start checking down these diagonals. You can go f6 at the right moment, open the bishop, the king just gets hunted. And if you don't capture the rook, well again your king just gets hunted, you know, this kind of stuff. Oh, by the way, this move's crazy. You can literally give a rook for a pawn just to open up this diagonal for the queen here. And again, the king just gets hunted. It's horrible, this kind of thing here. Because once you block the g file, then you can actually take the queen. The rook's no longer pinning. So long lines there, I know, but this is the reason why takes on c2 was best. It just gives all of this counterplay stuff. You know, you suspect Danya would have just slammed that down in an instant, but we didn't have that one. We had king h7 instead. But this is just a losing move. And if you want to pause and look for the beautiful sacrifice, then please do so. So the move that Danya played here was rook takes on g7 with check, just ripping open the king. The king recaptures, the queen checks, king g8, and now did you see the follow-up move? Again, pause if you want to look for it. Stunning idea, bringing that last piece into the attack. We had knight e6 here. So you're threatening mate in 1, takes is forced, and now we check down here, king moves, bishop f6, again we're threatening mate, so black goes rook g5, crazy looking move, but it does stop the mate, pawn takes, now king g6, and black is trying to run here, so what does Danya do? Nope, you're not coming to these squares, pawn g4, blocks the escape route. And now there's nothing black can do. They chuck the b pawn and Danya mates like this. So I hope you enjoyed this game. If you want to see another Immortal bullet game between Danya Naroditsky and Alireza Firouzja, click here. Thanks for watching, see you soon.